Catch up on the hottest panels from Pulse 2026, the UK's leading conference for retail and e-com professionals. Whether you couldn't attend or had FOMO from sessions you missed on the day, there's no need to miss out on this amazing content. It's all available now on Inside Commerce. Dig in and enjoy.
I'm very excited to introduce our next talk, which is building your creator strategy from two globally recognized creators. Let's have a round of applause.
Check. All right, how you guys doing?
Hello.
I know we are influencers, like it said, but we don't bite. You guys can move up if you would like to. All right, and the lights are also blinding, so I can't even see how many people are out there. Probably for the best. We're going to kick into this here. We're going to talk about creators, and specifically creator marketing for brands. And so quick audience, as much as I can see with here. How many people out here actually create content themselves? We have any content creators out there? All right, let's go. Shout out all my TikTokers, Instagrammers, etc. How many people have a creator that works for your brand? You have like a person on the main feed who makes content on there. All right, a little bit. How many of you use UGC or creators for performance ads? All right, cool. So this is a pretty savvy group. In the UK, you never know. It's like capitalism is questionable. I'm just joking. All right, yeah. Hey, we got light laughter. All right, cool. So we will kick in. We're going to get super tactical in this talk. It won't all just be Americanized jokes. We're going to give some quick background on ourselves. We're going to talk through a bunch of successful creator program examples. We're going to talk through what makes good and bad content, the trends that are happening right now, and then we're going to get very tactical in basically breaking down all of the common types of creator programs, all of the things you have to build as far as process to do it, and some of the software that works for that. We want you to walk away with some really good specifics that could apply to your brand. We can kick in. Next slide. All right. So some quick backgrounds. We able to get the next slide there, or is there a clicker I can? All right, boom. Perfect. We can actually hit the next one, even one after that. Thank you so much. All right, so why should you listen to us? So I'm going to give some background. My name is Oren, and this is Clayton over here. So my background is I was a CMO. I've actually worked with Vervant prior, long before this, where I worked in the outdoors industry, then I worked in consumer electronics and in toy. And at one point I realized the brand I was working with sucked at organic content. We were using a lot of influencers. It wasn't quite going well. And I said, I'm going to figure out how to get 5,000 views myself on TikTok. It took a lot longer. It took like 50 videos, which was a lot, but it was a challenge to myself. And then it started going really well. Started to get hundreds of thousands of views relatively quickly after that. Fast forward today, it's about 3.5, 4 years later. I've got about 1 million followers across platforms, talking specifically about marketing, consumer psychology, why we buy, and all the tactics around that. And now working with brands across basically all areas of beauty, fashion, lifestyle, and B2B around that. And during that time, I met Clayton. We can fast forward a slide.
We affectionately say that we went to Twitter together because randomly 3 or 4 years ago, Oren DM'd me on Twitter and said, hey, do you want to have a chat? I had just gone freelance. I was actually laid off from a job and decided that I was going to go full-time on content creation. Most of my background comes really from a mix of being in the e-commerce space and working within fashion brands. So cut my teeth early on at places like Barney's New York, RIP, Michael Kors, and then shifted into startup land, working at small startups in the e-com space all the way up to larger ones like Yapo. And I'd always sort of been centered around this idea of like cultural commentary and wanting to create a space where people felt like they could see observations from kind of the 30,000-foot view. And so I've sort of built my own personal brand around the idea of taste, exploring what is taste, from why do we buy the things that we buy to what are the cultural, subcultural things that influence bigger cultural things. And so, for me and Oren, we met a few years ago and decided to launch a newsletter called Hyper. So it's something we've been working on for the last couple of years, and it's just meant to be a creative resource for brand builders, people who are in the trenches of making content from a marketing angle. So you might be a graphic designer, you might be on the agency side, you might be a CMO, and it doesn't really matter where you kind of fit into the brand spectrum. The kind of bigger piece that we've been seeing is that content as a medium is becoming king, and we want to be able to put together resources that help people build better brands into the zeitgeist. And so that's what we've been working on the last couple of years. But I think it's important to really frame up our talk by talking about media and how media has changed. And I know Oren has a couple of thoughts just on where we've been, but I think a lot of it is centered around this idea of gatekeeping, right? And We started with places like New York Times or The Guardian, right? 20 years ago, if you wanted to be culturally relevant within content as a brand, you needed to have the plug into the right journalist, or you need to have a good contact with a stylist who could get you into a celebrity fitting, or you needed to have the right contact with a buyer at Selfridges, for example. And all of that has just been wiped away and completely changed. And I think what we're seeing now is content creation has taken over.
And so it used to be, when I was running marketing teams, we had our paid media where we would spend our advertising dollars to get attention, and we had our own social media where we'd say, hey, we have our own channels and they establish a certain amount of views for us. And then now it's swapped to this chart. And this chart, I feel like, if you understand creator, if you understand organic media, is the biggest piece of alpha any brand has to basically not have to worry about gatekeepers or a certain amount of spend, and to be able to drive attention online with a real compounding effect. So you have your own social media. So again, your accounts that you have, whether you have one or several or a few, but then you have this enabled layer. This is the new layer. This is any employees at your company that make content, whether that's your founder, whether it's people that represent your brand in different ways, whether you've hired creators, people, some of the examples we'll talk about, have multiple people on staff that make content. Last job that I was at, we had separate creators. We had a TikTok account for Mexico, Canada, the UK, Germany, every place that we retailed had its own account with its own creator on it. That's pretty common. But that enabled sphere is growing. Basically, how are you giving people, without necessarily directly paying them, the ability to create a ton of content about you? And so that means seeding, obviously sending out lots of product to be able to have people make content that way. That is, again, throwing events where the goal is to have people make content at the event. And then there's just this idea of affiliate marketing, whether you're doing that on, I know TikTok Shop isn't here, but it's big in the US. But then we also have just affiliates in general who are doing content they're making at a percentage scale. But the more that you enable, so the more that's happening outside your ecosystem, that has such a larger reach potential than just your owned content, which a lot of savvy people on organic get, but a lot of brands still haven't made that transition. So there's alpha there. And then what I like to outline at the bottom is that when you had your own social and you were doing the ads, you had an organic conversation that happened around your brand that was smaller than even this enabled conversation. But the combination of owned and enabled increases that natural organic conversation around a brand in a way that really, really compounds, and is how we see all these new brands become culturally relevant so fast.
Yeah, so now we're in this new landscape, right, where the creators have fully taken over. And going back to the example around like old guard legacy media publications, sort of holding the keys to distribution, that's been completely dismantled, right? We're in this democratized era where gatekeeping is gone. Anyone can start an Instagram account, yap on the internet, and have a video that goes viral and hits 1 million views, right? And then you go from 0 followers to 10,000 followers. We've gone from buying our way into being able to earn your way, right? Like you could pay someone to post something about your product, and maybe it used to mean something, but as consumers, we're all smarter than that now. We can see through a lot of the noise and the BS around when people are being paid for stuff. And so what you have to do as a brand is be able to have a product and a brand message that's interesting enough to earn your way into the creators' world, right? So that they feel compelled to say something about a brand. And I think the third thing is that like specialization has taken over completely, right? Like having 100,000 followers on Instagram specialized in 2 or 3 kind of sub-niche topics means way more than having an influencer who has 2 million followers but very low engagement. And I think we're just in that world now where like this has taken over. And I want to shift into sort of the idea of good content and what makes good content. Oren has some interesting ideas.
And pop back one slide for a sec. All right, so because I want to call out how creators actually became the thing here and how algorithms work. So what you will see is that you have interest-based stuff on social media. So if you're interested in beauty, if you're interested in skincare, if you travel, I'm in the UK, I'm being served content about being an American tourist in the UK. That is how algorithms work. But then you multiply that by people, because people like to hear things in different formats and from different voices. So what do I mean by formats? Some people like to hear a person talking about a thing. Some people want to see a vlog, some people want to see a carousel. Based on what you interact with, all of these networks show you more of that. And then the ads that brands create basically interrupt that. And we'll talk about that in a second. But then you multiply that by not everyone wants to see people of a certain look or feel. So when you really begin to scale creator, you think about, okay, if I have a message, I need male creators, female creators, different races, different ages. All of these messages compound, which is how people build really large programs. And why it works is because that's how the algorithms work. And then that naturally goes into ads, because instead of saying your ad is going to interrupt people who are watching content that looks like this, you give them content that looks like that, ideally done by a creator, and you have basically a massive ecosystem to tap into. So what actually makes good content, and then how do we know? So one of the things that I've done since becoming a creator is start a program called Cut 30 where we train professionals to be creators. And those dots on the side is, since we started that program, the success of the videos, up into 1 million views, all the way to now and today, how many people who are creating from there actually make content? We have a database, we created the whole thing inside Claude, where we measure that, and we measure the formats of what's working week over week, month over month. Helps inform creative strategy work, but also shows us what is happening in the algorithms and what works. Pop forward to the next one. So what actually makes good content? And every time I speak to a room full of brand people, there's a bunch of people that get this and a bunch of people that are fighting the good fight, and that those that don't. People are saying, hey, if we want to make content about our brand, our product has to be at the center of it. We have to be selling at the center of it, which is just absolutely not the case. So the Venn diagram that I always like to show is that content is either entertaining, you watch something that is funny, or you watch people that are particularly good looking, or doing something that is just, again, you're entertaining, drama, a skit. And then content has value. Someone is learning something or teaching something. We live in a peak value content era. The best thing 90% of brands can do with a creator is get an expert on camera talking about the things those people are dealing with. I'm a dermatologist. This is what I think you should be doing for your skin. Here's 4 common problems that you interpret. Here's a misconception in our industry. That stuff performs extremely well and is great top and middle of funnel content for brands to begin that education process. But in the middle here, where something is entertaining and it has value, is peak content success. And so every time you create an asset, whether that's an ad asset or that's a creator asset or an organic asset, putting it through that lens is important. 2 quick examples on here. So on the bottom right is a local spot to me, the cheese store of Beverly Hills. They sell cheese, high-end cheese. Not necessarily the thing you'd think is the biggest on social media, but it is, because they document the passionate people at the store who work there talking about all the rare cheeses that they have, and then selling those cheeses. Someone comes in, they want something, they document the sale. And they've created a really entertaining format, similar to what you would watch on a TV food network, with some personalities that also has value. You're learning about cheese at the same time. Moving up above here, this is a Opal. It's a anti-social media app, like a social media blocker. They put a creator on a completely separate feed, and she purely did whiteboard-style conversations about mental health. And it became a big funnel for the brand, got tons of views, but she is, in a really candid, natural, fun way, describing things that have a huge amount of value to the audience, a younger Gen Z audience. What is mental health? What am I dealing with? How does this work? And so those are just 2 good examples of creator being used inside this framework.
Yeah, and I think everyone is probably at a different stage of the creator spectrum, right? Some of you may be having discussions internally about how do we weave our product into working with creators more regularly. We have a pretty decent sized scaled creator program. And then there's probably a bunch of you that maybe sit somewhere in the middle. But I think in general, just both of us making content full-time for a living, we interact with a lot of brands daily, and I feel like there's a few do's and don'ts that are worth touching on, right? And on the do side, I think what's best is to see this, if you want to interact better with creators, is to see it as a relationship that you're building long-term, right? You don't want to treat it as like a transactional one-off thing. I get like budgeting is always a conversation, right? Depending on the creator size, but there's a good chunk of creators who are willing to just take product at a first glance and like be able to give it some time to test, share with their audience. And I think the most important thing you give them is time, right? The worst thing is to rush into sending a product to a creator and demanding that they kind of post about it or say certain things about it. And on the flip side, you don't want them to rush the content either. The second thing I think that's maybe the most important in this conversation is to start to treat your relationships with creators almost like a brand deal, as if they were an athlete, right? And I think this is the direction that content partnerships are going between brands and creators, is that they're treating content like you're an athlete. You're going to sign a kind of a multi-month or a multi-year deal. And again, you don't want to jump into those conversations unless you feel like it's the right fit for the creators that you're working with. But in general, I just think the sort of one-off posts and then calling it a day doesn't really move the needle for the brand, right? Because for the creators audience, they don't know who you are as a brand. They don't understand what you're about. They don't understand what the brand message is. And sometimes that takes time to sort of seep through the noise. And so being able to treat it like as if it's a partnership that you're pushing towards long-term, it creates more trust between you and the creator, and they're going to be able to give you the best of their content in return. And then the last kind of 2 are building around the creator, right? You want to build around their message. What do they say that resonates? The worst is when you're given like a strict script, and I get everybody has like their own bureaucratic circles internally, and maybe from the higher ups that are making you want to say something to the creator that they have to work off a script with. But there's nothing worse than being able to having to read off of a script when you're talking about a product or trying to weave it into natural content. It just feels way too forced, and that's that's gonna be damaging, I think, long term in the relationships that you're trying to build. There's kind of two areas that we want to end with before we wrap up, and the first is just a couple sort of clear examples of how brands can interact in interesting ways with creators beyond just hiring a PR company to seed your product to hundreds of creators who will never post about you. So I'm going to walk through some of these examples, and examples that I love here is that like each one has a different angle, right? When Jacquemus does their fashion show invites, they always do a different angle, right? Like they'll do the bread and butter with the knife fashion show invite. This is the Gotus Lille skincare sun protection invite for different shows. Seeding, Pain is a brand that basically went from 0 followers to 50 to 100K before they even launched because they had a seeding program that was dialed in and they didn't even launch the site, but they were just gifting product out to creators. And so it was creating this buzz on the internet where everyone was wondering where the good art direction and where these shoes were coming from, but they didn't launch until later on. And so now they're consistently selling out of new collections. Have grown to over 100K on Instagram, and I think the seeding was a big part of that. Air is a software company that works kind of in the creative and e-com space, but they hired Pathetic, which is like a large fashion meme account, to create their own meme booth where you can take a selfie of yourself and share it with your friends, and then it would create your own like meme starter pack that shows just who you are, right? And it's like, these are all examples that I think work well because they're looking at the creator and saying, what does this person do really well? What do they specialize in? What does their audience resonate with the most? And then how can we weave our product, our brand, our message into that instead of saying, we're the brand, we have this new product launch, we want you to talk about it in this way. You can see the difference between the two. And so these are a couple more examples. Huckberry is a brand, a retailer based in the US, and they have this ad spend program where they will give 15% of their ad spend to the creator, right? So if you're putting $1 million in ad spend behind a specific ad, whatever they're making from that $1 million spent, they're giving straight up to the creator, and they're doing this with dozens and dozens of creators. So the creator is fully incentivized to make better content that's interesting and organic because they see the upside too. Levi's sent this guy to Coachella who's become really popular on the internet, and just let him do his thing. And then Nick's Beauty is a really good example of just having no script, no brief, just sending products to creators and seeding it and like seeing what they come up with. And it's been a big part of how they've been able to grow organically as well. So those are just a few examples of how you can think about partnering with creators right. And Oren wants to sort of end with more of the strategic side.
Pop back to, I'll hit those other two real quick in between. All right, one more back. All right, here we go. All right. So also, those were an example of creators that are off feed on their own accounts. I want to give an example of creators on feed, how to make your organic social basically not suck. So Def to Stock is an interesting one. They are a stock photo site. They have this creator, Agus. She's amazing on there. Well, she will break down trends that are happening in the world. Then that will lead to the visual inspiration of people wanting to buy stock photos. And then they collaborate with a cast of other creators who talk about zeitgeist-related content that makes their feed a go-to place for pop culture. Gymshark has been an interesting one because if you actually go to their feed, it is a constant flow of collabs of creators of all shapes, sizes, fitness levels, and looks that you basically are just turning into a non-stop curation of different places there. Cluely is a software brand in the US. It's a bit controversial, but they created a comedy series featuring a number of creators on their core account. And then Rarify, I love to call out because they are a vintage resale furniture site, and they just have their employees explaining the products they sell, which is the biggest no-brainer for any retailer or anyone with a big catalog to just have a few savvy people in a relatively nice environment. Then some quick examples of what this looks like at scale before I get into some tactics to end here. And why I think scale is important is if people start to tap creator. You get one on a feed, you see 10 influencers, and you're like, okay, this is okay, but it doesn't move the needle next to traditional campaigns. That's not what the brands are doing that are killing it in this space. Grunz and Comfort, those are two, Grunz just got acquired. Comfort's also like a huge hoodie brand. They are doing thousands of creators. There are thousands of posts every month. And this one in particular, Grunz has a goal, a CAC to LTV goal, customer acquisition cost to lifetime value. They want to have a 3-to-1 goal for that. And they found that through affiliate marketing, in particular, getting creators to do something on a percentage, they've been able to achieve that and scale that to the thousands. Kosas is another example of doing this through brand trips. They'll invite 5-10 creators on a trip. Why I like to call that out is because the way algorithms work, when you get creators to interact together, when you're savvy about it, people look at those and they go, they're wasting money on entertainment. No, there's a compounding effect in the algorithm when people actually engage. And there's an ecosystem of people talking about it, like a media event. And then Ladder is one of my favorite examples because they hired on staff about 20 creators. They're a fitness app, and they basically have hired influencers to be the coaches on the fitness app and to post for the brand. So if you interact in the fitness world, they have literally every age, gender, style, Pilates, strength training, whatever it is. They've got an influencer on every niche, and so you are inescapable if you are in that to be able to find their coaches and their content. So we were going to end here. I'm going to zip through. I know we're at our time. I'm going to take 60 seconds and just zip through tactics of this if you want to start. So rolling quickly through the strategies we talked about here. There is traditional influence, hiring a big influencer to get in front of people. Useful strategy. Probably not the best use of your dollars right away. Micro-influence, working with a lot of smaller creators to test things, get things into your ad account, begin to see what that reach looks like, effective. Retainer is getting those same people, getting creators on existing month-to-month. Most brands trying to fill up their UGC have a handful of people doing that. We recommend spreading that through a number of styles. Then we have, going into accounts, dedicated accounts. So again, if you have an account for your brand, having other creator accounts, whether that's for a region or a style of content. So you could have one, we're launching in Australia, we have an Australia account. If we want an ASMR or a behind the scenes account. And then we have scaled accounts. That's brands who are doing this with 50, 70 accounts where they're really going and hiring a lot of people to do that. Infrastructure to do this. People say, hey, how do I even get my first creators? They are in your existing customer base. You can access that by asking on Instagram stories or email. There's also a piece of software called Outer Signal, where you are able to go into your list, your email list, or Klaviyo, whatever it is, and actually it will show you who are your influencers, who even has a social media account, and you pick those people and you begin your programs with them. They know your product, they're ultra savvy, and you turn that into a recycled thing where either they're becoming affiliates or you're just seeding them new products. That is the easiest win to go from 0 to 1. Then there is the actual, how do I find more of those? That's where you get programs like Social Snowball, Super Affiliate, where they actually have access to Meta's creator search. They automate outreach, and you could begin DMing a lot of them, and then get them into affiliate programs on your site where there's money back and forth, applying some light retainers. And then you get into the whole flow of, we need to onboard these people, briefing them like the way you brief ads, sharing that organic content with your ad account. Every piece of those creator assets, you should be working out a financial system to test them inside the Meta ad account, test them inside YouTube and TikTok ads. You will see all the scale brands doing this right. Start with that organic strategy, begin bringing them over into performance, and all of a sudden you don't have to worry about finding more assets for ad accounts. Then what you see people end up doing is they'll share success. They will say, hey, these are the things that are working, these are the hooks, these are the processes, and they will share them across all their creators. And then there's multipliers on top of that, where if you have a lot of creators you work with and you want to enable them, it's sending them really interesting products. I work with a brand that sent all of their creators higher-end cameras. Worked with another brand who basically booked a bunch of their creators luxury hotel rooms to be able to make nicer content in one blitz they were doing around a new product launch. You have all these things you can do once you have a program to facilitate more of it. So I know that was relatively rapid fire at the end, but I wanted to make sure you had some tactics and software to apply no matter what size you are. I think that's all we have here for today. I appreciate you talking about creators with us.
Thanks for the time. And if you find us throughout the day or tomorrow, just tap our shoulder. Happy to chat about any of this stuff. But thanks for having us.